3 regions, a 4th region coming up. So we are definitely investing our capital to build all the compute infrastructure so that you benefit from having compute infrastructure that's world-class for you to build your applications. Now, the cloud is just not going to remain in data centers. The cloud is going to distribute itself. Distributed computing will always remain distributed. And Azure Arc for us has been actually a pretty major breakthrough, even in the last couple of years. It's helped us take and embed compute in a factory, in warehouses, in retail outfits, because the world, especially with 5G and what comes after with low latency access to the edge, you will have a distributed computing fabric that spreads across. And so we're building out the software stack and the hardware stack so that we can embed computing in the real world. And we have significant momentum right here in India. When I look at it, like whether it's the conglomerates of the Tatas, the Adanis, the Geos, and everything that they're doing, it's sort of complete night and day from a few years to where they are in terms of their cloud intensity. Whether it's the startups that are all here today, right? All using and really scaling and building world-class infrastructure. And of course, our global SI partners who are not only using it to build their own infrastructure, but again, scaling it for everyone in the world. So there's just tremendous amount of momentum when it comes to the cloud. Now, let's move to the next area. The thing that everybody is buzzing about is AI. And, here's one fascinating stat. Today, when you think about AI, data that's generated through generative models, it's pretty much nothing. It's less than 1%. But it's expected to grow to, large double-digit numbers pretty soon. And you see it. So I said, let's have some fun with these generative models. So I went and asked Dolly to dream of the future of Bengaluru. It came up with some pretty nice pictures. I think, look at that, huh? That's where I want to live. It's beautiful. So I said, okay, let's take the other generative model that people talk about. Let's ask it about the future of Bangalore. So we went to ChatGPT and said, give us, what do you think is the future of Bangalore? It had a lot of nice things to say about all of you folks, let me tell you. You're all brilliant, you're all great, except you got to solve the traffic problem. But it is beautiful. Like it sort of at least has a lot of optimism for what's going to happen. So then I said, okay, let's really ask it the question. What about the South Indian tiffins? How would you rank order them? So it came back with all of these things that I wish I could have for breakfast every day. And then I said, for some reason it thinks biryani is a tiffin, but the last time I checked it was not. But, I love biryani too, so I kind of gave it the prompt, I don't think so, and then it apologized to me very politely and said, as a Hyderabadi, you can't insult me by saying, biryani is a tiffin. and then so I said, okay, why don't you write a play where the idli argues against the dosa as to who is the better tiffin in the world? And it did it. And then I said, why don't we make it a Shakespearean play? And it went on and brought out the best of Shakespeare in South Indian tiffin genre. So, it's all fun. It's just fascinating to see how these generative models are capturing the imagination, right? So the question is, what is all this? To me, what it is it's a reasoning engine that I think we can use as frontline workers, as knowledge workers, as any professional doing any design task, any creation task, to truly have this be a co-pilot that helps us do whatever task we are setting out to do more creatively, more productively, bring out more ingenuity, break down some of the barriers, the learning curves for every one of us. So I think it's a golden age. It depends. There will definitely be unintended consequences that we will have to guard against. So AI ethics, AI safety, alignment with human preferences, these are huge topics. Displacement is going to be a huge topic. But we have to take those all as first-class considerations. What is possible, what are the unintended consequences, and work on them as a developer community, as a community of digital enthusiasts who then really make sure that the ultimate benefits of this can be realized. By the way, the first thing, though, we also have to really get our act together in terms of how we manage the data infrastructure. In a world where all this data is getting generated, one of the things that's going to be very needed is, do we have the robust scale data infrastructure for all this variety, all this volume, all this velocity? And the good news is we've been at it, right? Just like the cloud has helped us create the AI, even the data platforms are in a state where we can deal with this, and of course it has to evolve. At Microsoft, we're building out all of this infrastructure for all the operational stores, the connecting those up, whether it's sort of Cosmos DB, which is a regionless scale database, or SQL, or then to be able to directly using Synapse Link connect it to the analytics, right? There's a real-time connection between what is operational and analytics. And then have governance, because after all, data provenance is going to be a massive thing, right? Which is, where was I trained? How was this model trained? What is happening in terms of information leakage or not? These are all going to be very, very important considerations for everyone. So really thinking about the data fabric that is truly coming together in support of large-scale AI training and large-scale AI inference, both of those, is, I think, going to be one of the big considerations. So we are building that. The second thing that also we need to build, as I said, in order to have these large models, you need world-class AI infrastructure. And whether it's on training or on inference. And this is where we at Microsoft with Azure have gotten ahead. And it's thanks to sort of the partnership with OpenAI and the feedback loop there and what we have built. And you can, do your own benchmarks today in terms of large-scale training and large-scale inferencing. We have the best infrastructure. And the uniqueness there is, in fact, building out not just having the right silicon. Of course, that's where we have partnered deeply with NVIDIA, but also to be able to think about the full system architecture, right? The networking. The first time I saw Hadoop is when I said, wow, these data parallel workloads are so different. This was late, I think maybe 2007, maybe. And then when I look at these large training jobs, they're so different. They're synchronous, the way they cohere, their power draw, it's just a completely different ball of wax, and you have to think about the technology behind it in pretty unique ways. We're taking all of the output of all these large models, making them available as cognitive services, Azure OpenAI API. OpenAI themselves have APIs that's on Azure. So we're going to democratize access to these large models so that you all can go on to build on top of it. And even in this trip in India, it's fantastic to see the use cases, right? I had a chance to meet the folks over at Seeds, which is a nonprofit which is taking all high-def satellite imagery and creating essentially micro-forecasts for disaster relief, right? So their volunteers can go to a neighborhood and say, here's what may happen during a flood, and help them evacuate to the right spot. So it's just great sort of use case of using AI, in fact, to help people, especially at a vulnerable time. The other thing that was truly, for me, perhaps my most mic drop moment on this trip was what I saw with Bhashini, which is the program of the National Language Translation Mission. Obviously we are working with them along with all the other mentors of this program to enable essentially a digital public good around language translation so that everybody in India has the ability to tap into great AI models that essentially, whether it's speech-to-speech, speech-to-text, text-to-speech, across all languages is possible, right? So that's, first of all, we can go on and talk about what's happening in India with digital public goods. It's phenomenal. It's just unbelievable for me to see the India stack mature and go, the use cases between the technology and the policies. There's nothing like that I see anywhere else in the world, and it's fantastic for India to lead and then contribute this back to the world even. And to me, the thing that I saw was I did the demo in Hindi, where the gentleman asked about a particular government program in Hindi. It came back with a response, and in the response it said, go to the portal. And the person says, no, I don't want to go to the portal. Can you do this for me and figure out some other suvidha? And he did it. And that is, it just automated it. So here's somebody speaking in any Indian language, expressing a complex thought, and saying, I want to navigate all of these programs, and I want to get this done. The bot comes back and sort of suggests what they should do. It says, no, that's not what I want you to even get this done for me. It's like having a co-pilot, a personal assistant, an agent that is provisioned for you to get stuff done. That last mile, they took GPT, trained it on all of the data, that is government data, and essentially used the front-end language translation with the understanding of all of that data. Think about what I just described. Here is someone in India, in a rural part perhaps, speaking in their language, and essentially creating a session in which what was developed maybe 2 months ago, a month ago, as a large model somewhere else in the world, and both of those got connected. And when I saw that, I said, God, this is a changed world where the diffusion of the latest and greatest technology and its ability to make it really impactful for someone's life in a rural part of India, that's the world that I always said I dreamt of being in, and I think we're there. And it's up to us now to be able to take this and amplify it. So it's a fantastic thing to all of you for doing it. And in fact, it doesn't end. My amazement doesn't end. So in fact, the other team I met recently was a set of high school kids from the National Public School at Koramangala. In fact, I met them in Delhi yesterday. And they built this cool thing called the Bloom Box. What it does is it basically has a camera, it has speakers, it essentially does sign language translation. For anybody who has hard of hearing, can in fact be able to sort of sign language, both translation, and have economic opportunity. They showed even a retail scenario in which the person who was at the vending shop had the impairment, and they were able to still be employed. And so it's just fantastic to see how some of this AI is making its way into technology that is having a real social impact. Speaking of that, ultimately, the thing we care about, right? The first product at Microsoft was a developer product. It was the basic interpreter for the Altair. A lot has happened since 1975 to now. But at the core, I think we are a company that gets up every morning to build better tools for developers so that they can build more technology. That's who we are, and that's how we will continue to be. So we care a lot about developer productivity or the Fusion teams, because it's about software developers, designers, everyone coming together, right? So it's not just about the software development is not in isolation. And the low-code, no-code tools are going to be massive trend, but we are building out everything, whether it's the low-code, no-code tools with Power Platform, or whether it is Visual Studio and VS Code, or GitHub. GitHub is where people are doing pretty amazing things, where open source projects are being born, where people from all over the world are able to contribute. It's where sort of innovation happens. But the thing that perhaps in the last year, right, having talked a lot about these LLMs and large foundational models, the place where, the first product we launched in collaboration with OpenAI and their Codex model was the GitHub Copilot. And it's phenomenal to see what has happened there, right? The ability to go in and have GitHub Copilot really scale. Oh, by the way, before I go there, let me do one thing. Before I go and talk about our stuff, let me congratulate the 100,000 people who over the last month have gotten certified. It's always, whenever I meet anybody at Microsoft, I say, hey, what's happening with certifications around Microsoft? In fact, yesterday, the person who was the contributor to Seeds was somebody who was at 16 years a youngest Microsoft certified engineer. And so it gives me great, great pleasure to see all of the folks in the room who in the last month, 100,000 of you who have gotten certifications in India, which is a record number, and it's fantastic to see that. So GitHub Copilot is changing software development. There's no question. In fact, on New Year's Day, I was on my news feed and I saw this tweet from Andrej, which just really blew me away, right? Which is, as those of you know, Andrej was at Tesla. He was the father of the autopilot. And, he's let's call him a pretty elite AI developer. And he's talking about 80% of his code being written. That doesn't mean Andrej is not doing unbelievable creative work. That means that Copilot is helping him be that much more productive. That's the breakthrough, right? So that means we all can be doing so much more with our time and focusing on the most creative parts of what we can do. And that's a game changer. And that's kind of just a glimpse of, I think, what's to come. In fact, the same pattern repeats itself. Like you go into Power Apps, and you see this with Power Platform, where we are building everything from Power Apps to Power BI to Power Automate. All of these things are coming together as a powerful low-code, no-code tool. It gives me just tremendous amount of confidence that these are the kinds of things that probably will help us take this digital revolution and make it part of every domain expert's life as well. And even on the AI side, like you can do a sketch on a napkin, take a photo, it'll generate the app for you, right? That's what Power Apps already has. Power Automate, you can prompt it, right? There's a complete new field of prompt engineering, but you can prompt a workflow. You could say, hey, take my email that's coming in and then send a notification or trigger this workflow. All that can be just an English language prompt and the workflow will just get created for you. So tremendous amount of capability for people who are even domain experts to be able to express their thoughts in natural language and have essentially the output be products like applications or workflows. One thing that I always think about it is, if you take two extremes, let's take Lambda Test. In fact, I had a chance to meet the founder from Lambda Test this morning, and this is a company that is doing for test automation what, say, Kubernetes did for container orchestration, right? Which is really create that next level of efficiency around test automation so that people can actually focus on testing versus test orchestration. But the interesting thing for me is how they use the GitHub platform internally. It just kind of, for everybody else, I think it gives you a template of what a dev-driven organization looks like. They use GitHub as the consensus platform for everything. So if you want a new requirement, right, you do a pull request. And so to me, that's another way to think about it. When a company becomes digital first, the entire workflow of the company changes. And I think it's a good thing for all organizations to take a look at it and say, hey, the feedback loop between what is happening with a salesperson, a marketing person, and a developer, if that is translated into, oh wow, those are all about pull requests on some consensus platform. It's just a very different way to think about how coordination happens, how the velocity of innovation happens. So it's very, very exciting to see Lambda Test and what they're doing, both their output and how they're working. The other one, similarly, I had a chance to meet Mr. Ram Kumar, who works at SBI in Chennai. He happens to have visual impairment, but he decided that he's in marketing. He was not in IT. He sort of felt that there was a lot of paperwork that he was going through, and it was pretty mundane. And he, along with two colleagues, decided that they were going to automate it. So they picked up Power Apps, learned Power Apps, and built an application now that's broadly deployed in the Chennai region. In fact, now SBI is going to take that and scale it and have even a center of excellence across the entire enterprise. But again, think about this. Perhaps more than anything else, when I see someone in India who's a domain expert, not in IT, has even a visual impairment, is able to take a digital tool, learn it, but not just use it, create with it a tool that others can use and benefit, and take pride in it, right? The fact that they now have a new skill, that new skill will have better wage support. That, to me, when we talk about empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, there cannot be like a better example than that. And it gives me great satisfaction to see the impact of it. So now, let's talk about the next imperative. What's happening with work? Let's face it, right? There's no going back to 2019. The world's changed, and there is, fascinating data that is emerging around how has the world changed. The first thing is, of course, what I characterize as this productivity paranoia. You ask any leader, they'll say, God, I don't know whether we're being productive. You ask anybody who's an employee, they'll say, I'm burnt out, I'm working all the time. I don't know whether I'm sleeping at work or working from home. But that challenge at this point should not be about any individual dogma. Ultimately, we all are responsible for being productive, right? Ultimately, organizations have to move forward, produce things that are competitive in the marketplace, and competition is going to be heavy. And if that is the case, then data should help us. And so that means one of the things is aligning people's goals so that people can then drive outcomes and use that and have the flexibility needed to achieve. Because the patterns of work are only good if they're helping you achieve objectives. You should not be dogmatic, I think, about the patterns of work. You should be more, dogmatic, if anything, or accountable for outcomes. And so that's at least how we think of what needs to happen there. The other one, of course, is people come for people, right? If I say, hey, come for a meeting that I'm scheduling, nobody will show up. If I say I'm doing an event, come for the event, I'll give you good South Indian coffee. Maybe people will come. But, to me, I think soft skills that we need to learn as leaders to really cultivate that people-to-people connection is something that we have to rebuild. And it'll make us all better leaders for it. It'll all make us better co-workers for it. And I think that's a thing that we have to think about. Even when you convene a meeting, if two people couldn't make it for whatever reason, making sure that they feel included, right, even if they're remote, is going to be very important. So these are all subtle things that I think we have to get much better at. Of course, you also have to re-energize. So just because you hired someone doesn't mean they have been recruited. You have to keep re-recruiting them. In fact, skilling is going to be hugely important. In fact, the interesting data point, in India, it's absolutely the case, right? You see it even on LinkedIn. The number of people sort of talking about skills is twice the global rate. And so that means it grows loyalty. Any company that is investing in helping their employees build new skills and be proud of those new skills and then giving them a wage support on those skills, I think are going to be very, very critical. So that's what's driving the three systems we're building, Microsoft 365, Teams, as well as Viva. These are all things that we're building in the context of this data. Microsoft 365, to me, is just like how I was in the early 90s when I started at Microsoft. I was excited. Every day we would have Access launches, Publisher launches, the new versions of PowerPoint launches. It was just exciting time of creative expression tools. And I feel the same way now, right? With tools, whether it's Designer with Dolly built in, or whether it is Clipchamp, or whether it's Loop, all of these tools are again going to be infused with AI and really change, I think, the way people express and create. We're building out Teams as this 5-in-1 system, right, where we have, in fact, if anything out of the pandemic, Teams has emerged as its own first-class platform, whether it's meeting, chatting, collaborating, or business process automation. All of these things are built into one platform. In fact, I would say the best feature of Teams is its app platform. So for those of you who are developers building applications so that they're discoverable inside of Teams, right? Even those line of business applications, the fact that you build a Power App, you put it into Teams, and then it becomes a collaborative app. So every one of these CRM, ERP applications now has a collaborative front end built inside of Teams. Huge opportunity for developers to expand the reach of your web apps or any other effort so that they have people workflow around it. We are continuing to evolve Teams. I'm excited about Microsoft Mesh. Mesh is really going to take the concept of presence and essentially, to me, presence has always been the dream, right? Which is, how can I have real presence without being there? And Mesh will take steps, whether it's the avatars or it's the virtual worlds, starting with meeting rooms that we'll be able to create. In fact, you'll see it in Teams. And at the World Economic Forum, you'll see the next set of demonstrations of Mesh in use to create that real sense of presence in virtual worlds. So we are very excited about Mesh as a platform to break the metaverse a real thing. And to me, Viva is the next logical step for us to take when it comes to productivity at the organizational level. We are taking a suite of applications from skilling and learning so that we can drive growth, to connections between front and first line workers and knowledge workers, because one of the things we learned a lot in the pandemic is how people on the front line need to be connected with the regional office, their headquarters, and there should be a communications channel for all of them. All of that we're bringing together, but one application that I'm really excited about is Viva Goals. Everybody's is doing OKRs today. And the question is, what's the ability to help organizations get aligned? Like when we talk about productivity paranoia, the one way to get out of it is to say, okay, let's have OKRs. Let's make sure there's visibility on those OKRs and let's measure ourselves on the outcomes and the key results. And so we're building out the tool chain, just like Office for expression and creation. Think of Viva as for organizational connection and productivity. And so we are very, very excited about Viva and what it'll do for, I think, both business process and really the next generation of usage. Air India, I just came to know about all of their use cases. What Chandra and the Tata Group are doing with Air India is fantastic to see. And one of the key things in airlines is that frontline to knowledge worker collaboration, because an airline operation rests on the flow of information that really is seamless. And that's where I think Microsoft 365 system in its entirety is going to be very, very super beneficial in the context of what they're trying to get done. The next trend I wanted to very briefly talk about is the collaborative business processes. We are building our own line of business applications with Dynamics 365 with this being really centered around being much more proactive versus reactive, right? When in this AI age, in this age of data and collaboration, the idea that I go to a CRM system or an ERP system is going to change. You are not going to go to the Biz app. The Biz app is going to come to you in context of your workflow. So that ability to be much more proactive is what's going to be transformative in all business applications. And so we are building everything, whether it's customer service, finance, supply chain, all of it as these new generation of applications. Another area is this industrial metaverse, right? If Mesh is doing stuff for presence, the other place is what's happening with digital twins. Everywhere we see, we now have the ability to have sensors on assets that are streaming data, creating a twin. Once you have a twin, you can do simulation. You can be much more energy efficient. You can reduce waste. And then, in fact, have that as lights out operations of the asset itself. And so many, many examples. In fact, L&T is doing phenomenal work. They have, I think, 300,000 assets across 500 plus sites that are all connected, all using Azure IoT, being streamed in real time into a data lake, and from that data lake all the way to a Power BI front end that they have to be able to visualize what's happening with all these assets. So just an unbelievable use case of the industrial metaverse. And then the last imperative I want to briefly talk about is security, right? I mean, one of the challenges we have with security is 6 trillion is lost to cybercrime today, and it's projected that 10 trillion will be lost by 2025. So it's a real challenge. It's a real place where I think all of us will have to do some of our very, very best work, because as digital technology becomes more pervasive, this will be the challenge we will have to overcome. And the approach we have to take is the zero trust approach, which is you have to assume breach and make sure that you are able to sort of detect that breach and protect yourself and make sure that it doesn't laterally propagate, right? That's the key. In fact, I always say to all our security teams, there should only be one victim of anything new. That's the goal, right? To assume that there will never be a breach, that's just not going to be the case. But you should be great at being able to respond fast. And so in order to do that, one is you got to build an end-to-end architecture. Right? You can't have multiple data planes, multiple management planes, multiple control planes. So one of the things from identity to device protection and endpoint protection to the application protection, all the way back to the infrastructure the application using, has to be something that you can in fact set policy on, that is uniform, and not only set policy, then you have to have the operational security posture. That is, you're seeing all the data signals. In our case, we see trillions of data points across all of that, and then you can do all of the sophisticated machine learning on top of it to be able to then take that proactive step to protect, right? So zero shot. You see a new piece of malware in one endpoint, that's where it needs to end. It can't go anywhere else. You see one social engineering phishing attack, it needs to end there. And so that ability to propagate is going to be the most critical thing. And we see many, many examples across the country, from Axis Bank to Tata Digital to Indigo to Godrej to Flipkart, all using different parts of our technology. But security is a place where I know there's going to be a lot of innovation even coming out of the developer ecosystem in India. We want to partner with all of you, but make sure that we as a community of developers are responding to these threats in a much more energized way, because I think that will be very much needed for us to get the benefits of all the other technology that we talk about. I also want to talk about this one program, right? I had a chance to meet a young lady from Kerala yesterday in Delhi. She read about the cyber being something that could have employment opportunity. And so she came across the Cyber Siksha program, which is specifically designed to help women to join as professionals in the cybersecurity space and train them up and give them economic opportunity. It was fantastic. So she went to Delhi. She picked up English. She picked up cyber security skills. She picked up Hindi. And now she's employed. And it's just a great program that we know we have a massive demand for cyber professionals. And it's great to see both the gender divide and the issue around the shortage of cyber skills both being bridged by this program. So it's wonderful to see. So that's where I want to end out, which is we stay grounded on our mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Ultimately, though, for me, it's about being able to put all the power of this technology in the hands of other technologists so that they can go on to create more technology, to have real impact in the world across every small business, large business, non-profit, public sector. And so couldn't be more excited to be in India, to be able to talk about all of this, to see all of what's being developed here. So thank you all very much. So with that, what I'll have is I'll have my friend Nandan Nilekani come up to stage.
Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Nandan. In fact, as I said, I think the last time I was here, I was with you on a stage like this. And
That's
we
right.
had a great conversation. And of course, the world changed right after that. And I thought, Nandan, maybe I'll ask you, since you were the one who even got India going on this entire concept. Every time I've come and talked to you, you've talked about how these digital public goods are the most needed in order to have real impact in the world, and to, especially where it's most needed. And can you maybe describe Where are we with it? What is uniqueness you see in India and what is happening in India around digital public goods?
I think we're just halfway on the journey, Satya. Basically, the big picture, big vision is how do we create a digital-first economy and society, leveraging the power of modern digital technology and all the things you talked about to actually improve the lives of people, to bring economic growth, to make it more equitable, more inclusive, open access, and really allow people to use their own data to move forward. So the philosophy behind this, and it began with Aadhaar, 1.3 billion people, 80 million authentications a day. Then NPCI built UPI, which does 7 to 8 billion transactions a month. Then we have the account aggregator system, which will allow democratization of lending, where anybody can borrow money using their own data. So data becomes information collateral. We have the AI stuff, working with OpenAI and so on. Then there's ONDC, which is going to completely disaggregate e-commerce and allow suppliers, consumers, and delivery agents all to work through an open protocol. I mean, there's a ton of things going on. But fundamentally, how do we create a digital-first country transformation? That's really what this is all about.
Yeah, and it's pretty unique to see it. I mean, yeah. And quite frankly, I mean, and a big thank you to you. I mean, like none of this, always things need a start. And then, of course, it also requires all of the nurturing for it to scale. And what surprised me, quite frankly, is the scale numbers you were. And the fact that one builds on the other, right? It's kind of one of those things where it all feels like a grand plan. Was it a grand plan?
Well, parts of it were, but parts of it we learned along the way. And I think the important thing was there's a group of people within the government, the Prime Minister's the biggest supporter of this, and he always says, why can't we get it done by next week? So that's a bit difficult to meet him because he sets these these hard...
You keep postponing.
Yeah, I said, hang on. And then we have great talent in the system, technocrats, volunteers. So it's actually a very loose coalition which has put this together. But what is your feeling? Do you think this is something which has global applicability?
No, 100%. First of all, I think that, I had a chance even to have a brief conversation about this with the Prime Minister yesterday, to your point. Yeah. His vision and even all the programs, the yojanas, and India Stack. In fact, the thing that I'm realizing is it's the magic of India Stack, because everything needs a feedback loop.
That's right.
It's the yojanas and the policies and the technology stack co-evolving.
That's right.
That's just a virtuous cycle that is unlike anything I've seen, and it's just tremendous. And to your point, I absolutely think both of these as perhaps the greatest contributions that India can make to the world, quite frankly. When I think about it, the idea that there is a digital public good is great. But there's a digital public good, but I'll even call it some sort of new ways to use them to make it possible for every society and economy to be more inclusive, right?
Exactly.
Which is, what is it that I learn in India every time I come? It goes back to even that thing I was talking about, Bhashini.
Exactly.
Which is, it's the common man able to use the greatest technology to do something that is useful to them. And it's not about tech for tech's sake. And that, to me, is what I think India can contribute, which is, I think, the age of celebration of technology for technology's sake is over. It's about really thinking about technology and its use for everyone in the world. And that, I think, can be the greatest contribution.
Great. Thank you.
And speaking of that, maybe on top of the digital public goods, Nandan, the other thing that's happening, of course, is all the entrepreneurial energy. We are, after all, at the capital of India's entrepreneurial energy. How do you think about that? Like, what are you most excited about as someone who was the originator of it all?
Well, we had the original startup at Infosys. So. But I think what I'm actually fascinated, because in 2016, we had 1,000 startups. Today, we have 90,000 startups. It's like unbelievable. And my own journey in this, I feel like Rip Van Winkle, because in 2014, I came back after the Aadhaar project, and I live in Koramangala, which I didn't realize is the epicenter of this stuff. So I used to go for walks, and every small house would have some signboard, and bleary-eyed guys coming out at 6 in the morning after doing an all-night session. So I realized there's something afoot. And I think it's amazing, the energy, the startups, the the kind of innovations. I meet young people with huge ambition and excitement. And many of the digital public goods that we have created actually enable a lot of this. I mean, Jio was able to scale up to 1 million customers a day because they use Aadhaar eKYC. Zerodha became the largest broking company using Aadhaar eKYC. All the payment banks. In the payment space, you have people like PhonePe who built large franchises on this. So all these technologies actually enabled in an open manner with APIs for private innovators to use. And when you look back at it, the original internet was that. It was a digital public good created by the government. It was used by all the companies. GPS was that. It was a digital public good created by the government, and today we have so many applications. So that's the same philosophy, taking it all the way forward to what a modern economy and society needs.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way. In fact, I love the way you described it, because the original vision of the internet was that,
exactly.
Which is it was the great leveler,
exactly.
so that everyone can build and create, and there will be frictionless access to it. And in some level, some of the new protocols and the stack work is re-bringing that ethos.
Absolutely. The Beacon protocol, which is the underlying protocol for ONDC, the unbundling, commerce, mobility, so everything is getting unbundled and is being put together in a much more interoperable and societally good way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that and then also the fostering great amount of competition.
That's right.
At the right layers, so that there's no, I would call it, sort of incumbency.
Yeah. Basically, we're creating interoperable digital rails at very low cost, very high volume population scale, and allowing innovation on top of that.
Yeah.
But tell me, you a few years back, you took $1 billion bet on OpenAI, and I think a lot of people said, what's wrong with this guy? And today, you're looking phenomenal. So can you tell us about your vision on that and what made you take that big bet?
Yeah, I mean, it's phenomenal, Nandan, to see what's happening with these foundational models, right? The fundamental, thing is we're seeing emergent scale effects. GPT-3 to 3.5 and what comes next are all really exciting to see. And we're obviously thrilled with our partnership with OpenAI. As I said, in fact, one of the first things that really helped us was build, quite frankly, cloud infrastructure. I've always, in fact, when I think about, like, the one thing we all have to stay grounded is in order to build AI, you need the cloud.
That's right.
But you need a cloud that is very different, right? In fact, having grown up all my life in the cloud, the types of infrastructure that is required to do this large-scale AI model training is very different, right? And the network becomes very, very important, as I was mentioning, how these models are much more synchronous, how they cohere. It has to be, that workload shapes the infrastructure. That feedback loop has been very, very helpful for us building, both on the inference side and on the training side. So then the question is, I mean, and I'm not going to say that this is the last big innovation. There will be a lot of model architecture innovation. There may be even new, more efficient breakthroughs on what is, what can be done. And we want to keep a very open mind to all of that. But we also want to really ride this wave in a very aggressive way. But what's the intuition? If you ask me what's the intuition behind it, it's a simple, if you sort of take one of these large models and let's say train it on all of the math equations, right? It gets good at math. But then let's say we train it on all the math equations and all of Kannada literature. It'll get better at math.
Okay.
Why is that? It's because that's what, we as humans do even, right? When we go to school, it's not like we only learn math. We learn math, we learn language, we learn history.
That's a great point.
And the general circuit sort of gets good, and the general circuit gets good at specific domain tasks. So it's kind of the same intuition, where here it shows up differently with scale effects.
So you had that intuition 4 or 5 years back.
As you said, look, in technology, it's all about being able to bet on great teams with real vision and the ability to sort of back them to the hilt. And that's what I saw in Sam and his group, and it has been fantastic. And so, they're true believers in it, and they along with even all of the folks at Microsoft Research and so on have done some phenomenal work to get us to a place where now it's showtime though. It's not about just, again, going back to a little bit of, I think, your coaching to all of us. It's saying technology is great, but let's now make it that
Absolutely.
it is really useful in the context of its social impact. So I think that's the
In
phase.
fact, our commitment is by the time we come 1 year later, you'll see real world applications using all the technology, GPT chat, multilingual, in the hands of 1 billion people. That's our mission.
That's the mission. Maybe on that note we can end. Thank
Great.
you so
Thank you
much,
so much.
Nandan. It's such
Thank
a
you.
pleasure seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
Super.
much. Thank you all.
See you guys.
Thank you very much.
देखेगी ये ज़मीन, देखेगा आसमां, देखेगा ये जहां एक नई दास्तां। रुक जाएगी धड़कनें, थम जाएगा ये समा। चला